constituents also that you understand we are sending a message for you to cease and desist.
You also have a direct infringement into state sovereignty when you start talking about our monetary policy. It was left to the Congress to be able to coin money, and they delegated that responsibility out to a group of private bankers. And we see that in Article 1, Section 10, that the states are required to only accept gold and silver as legal tender. Well, when you've delegated the authority out to print money by a federal entity, well, actually, it's not even a federal entity, a private entity doing so under the auspices of a federal entity, what you've done is you've basically made criminal organizations out of the states because they can't conduct their transactions in the gold and silver that they're required to under Article 1, Section 10.
In addition to state resolutions that put a freeze on federal taxes, comes an electronic gold system that would increase the gold tax base.
Well, the money bill I originally drafted was for New Hampshire, and it was based on the use of electronic gold currency, mainly because that's the cutting-edge technology now. But you could, at the present time, make it gold and silver because they've expanded that technology. But what essentially did was to have the state adopt as an alternative currency this electronic gold system. And in that particular case, it was to a relatively small percentage of the state's budget, because we tied it to the tobacco tax, make it simple, and not scare people too much. We're not going to jump into the lake with both feet. We're just going to put our toes in, as it were. About 10% of the state's budget would come in gold, and then the state would offer to pay out gold to whichever its creditors, to whomever it owed money, first come, first served. We'll pay that debt in gold. Now, the thought was, I think it's fair, that pretty soon that 10% of the state's revenue in gold would be out the door. People would be lining up to get that. Then the treasurer would come back to the legislature and say, you know what happened here? Our gold stock went to zero in a matter of a month. I need to have more of the tax base turned into gold, increase the gold tax base. And if it's correct that good money will eventually prevail over bad money, you would see most of that state economy, the state spending, would be on a gold basis. And then in the private economy, well, people are receiving gold from the state, and people are having to pay gold into the state for taxes. What about in the middle here? Well, now I'm going to start asking people to pay me in gold, or I'm going to start offering to pay the gold that I've received to people. And it would expand through the private economy, and the next thing you know, that state, for all intents and purposes, would be off the Federal Reserve System. Federal Reserve notes would be like a foreign currency, like euros or something. You'd only take them when you needed to deal with somebody out of that state that demanded to be paid in Federal Reserve notes. And the other state, people in other states would be looking at it and say, hey, why aren't we dealing in gold?
The federal government, the American government, is weak because it doesn't have a big army, a big navy, high taxes like a European power. And Jefferson said, no, this is exactly our strength. Americans love their government because it doesn't do anything to them. Right. But over time, as the judge was saying earlier, we've come to have this opposite model where now it seems that the government is able to decide how much you get paid, who your doctor's going to be, whether you can buy a gun, what you can, anything it wants to.
Well, if the states had as little power back then as they have today, nobody would have agreed with the Constitution. It seems like it's crept in slowly with people who started with a pure and noble desire to have a centralized government. And they've been encroaching on the rights of the states year by year, bit by bit, law by law, and nobody in the states woke up enough to say, that's too much. So what we're doing in Missouri is we're drawing the line in the sand, and we're saying, this is our territory, that is your territory. The Constitution says that this is our right. And unless we take back what was already given to us, we're not going to get any respect from them.
More than 35 states have already declared sovereignty or are in the process of declaring sovereignty against the federal government. And that doesn't mean that they've seceded, as the national corporate media spins it. They're simply stating, look, federal government, you're not supposed to be involved in local education. You're not supposed to be involved in local environmental rules. You're not supposed to be involved running and controlling our local police departments.
Jefferson makes a point that he actually took from Locke. He says, prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So there's the key to it, that people can put up with a lot, and probably they should put up with a lot of friction in the system, simply because the alternative of overthrowing a government with everything that that entails is potentially so horrendous that we don't want to get involved in that. But when it reaches the stage that you can look at what's going on and say, well, this is just a series of usurpations, abuses, which are leading inexorably to this result, then it is not simply one's right, it is your duty to take this kind of action.
The American people have read the Bill of Rights, they've read the Constitution, they've read their state Bill of Rights and Constitutions, and they figured out everything the federal government is doing is illegal and out of control and wrong. And so we're in the right. Not just in the right, it's our duty to stand up and say no and declare states' rights under the 9th and 10th Amendment that is enshrined in the Bill of Rights and in the Constitution.
The Declaration of Independence talks about the proper role of government. And right after it talks about the unalienable rights that we were blessed with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it states what government is for. To secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. And that's the bottom line. We are here to protect life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If your federal government isn't doing that, then the people, as the Declaration of Independence says, the people have the right and the duty to throw off such government and establish new guards for the future of our security and happiness.
It is altogether fitting this be done.
If you don't know what the Constitution says, there's no way you can uphold it.
It's the Cracker Barrel philosophers in Crabtree Corners, and it's the tycoons in Wall Street. It's all races, creeds, and religions. It's freedom to work at the job you like, freedom of speech and to peaceably assemble, freedom to own property, security from unlawful search or seizure.
Where's your warrant, flatfoot?
The right to a speedy and public trial. Protection against cruel punishments and excessive fines. The right to vote. And to worship God in your own way. It is these freedoms that have made America strong.
Okay, so we got our freedom. But management's lousing up everything.
Labor is at fault. It's ruining the country.
My constituents, as your elected representative, I can assure you Labor's right, management's right. I'm strictly neutral.
Labor, management, politicians, fooey. Oh, they can't tell corn from oats.
Wait,
Hurry, step right up, folks. Here's the answer to your problems. Dr. Utopia's sensational new discovery, ism.
George Washington said that government is not reason. Government is not eloquence. It is force. And like fire, is a dangerous servant and a fearful master.
Thomas Jefferson stated very succinctly, he said that the natural governing state of man is not total freedom. It is not liberty as enshrined in the Constitution. If you look at the history of civilizations across the ages, the vast majority, I'd say 90% of civilizations have been governed by an autocratic entity, an emperor, a king.
It doesn't matter where it is written or even if it is written. You know, you need to understand the difference between rights and privileges. A right is inherent. I can sit here and I can think anything I want. You can make a law that makes it illegal, you know, to think about circles. And I can sit here and just think round, 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 and I can just continue to break the law, and there's no way that anybody can know if I'm breaking the law, and there's no way that anybody can prevent me even if they know that I'm breaking the law.
If you don't know what the Constitution says, there's no way that you can uphold it. And what we have today are people in very high power places of power that are laughing at people who bring up the Constitution.
I don't worry about the Constitution on this, to be honest.
That's right.
Jackpot, brother.
I don't worry about the Constitution on this, to be honest.
The entity, i.e. the Congress, who has the responsibility under Article 1, Section 8 for our money and our monetary policy, if something goes wrong with it, they can't point the finger at somebody they delegated the job to. It's still their responsibility, and they need to take ownership for it. And we saw in the in the healthcare debate, we saw the legislators coming home and being held very directly politically accountable for their positions on healthcare, and that is the type of thing that these guys are trying to avoid.
Healthcare